Hello, everybody. Today we are back again with another installment of Best Practices with Pluto LMS. My name is JC Bonici. It's the 29th of September today, and we are going to be discussing learning paths and what is possible with the learning paths tool in Pluto LMS. So let's jump right in. So today, what I'm going to do is show you a range of examples that showcase the power of all these tools. Also give you an introduction towards course settings and some default settings. We will be covering those a little bit more in detail in future webinars. So let's jump into our agenda for today. The first thing we're going to cover is course paths. In other words, how do you set up an enrollment path so that the end user, once they're finished with one course, they're automatically enrolled into a second course. Then we'll take a look at conditional activity restrictions. In other words, that's dripping content within a course. So how an activity is restricted based on some conditional restrictions. Then we'll also take a look at activity completion settings and what those can look like. We'll take a look at the course completion settings as well as the activity completion default. And then lastly, we'll also take a look at course recompletion, which is useful for recertification and refresher courses. So we're going to take a look at all of that today, and we'll have a Q&A session towards the end. The first thing we're taking a look at is course learning paths. So a course learning path, as I explained earlier, is when you want the end user to automatically enroll into course B, in this instance, when they're finished with course A. So what we're going to do in this demo, or this webinar rather, is create a learning path from course A to course B, and then from course B to course C. And once course C is finished, we're going to want to open up moderate course A and moderate course B. And the idea is that the user can finish either one of these courses, and then they'll be enrolled into course C. So how do we do this? Well, let's jump into course A as our first course. And what we're going to want to do is set up the initial enrollment method. In this case, what you do, well, this is just the rest of course B. As I scroll down, I can see all the course material. So what I'm going to want to do in course A is jump down to enrollment methods, click on that. And what I've done here is I've set up the initial enrollment method. That would be branch B sync and a Stripe instance. In other words, for the first course, all members of branch B, I want to automatically enroll so that when a branch B member logs into the platform, they'll only see intro course A. So now that I have set up my enrollment methods for intro to course A, now we're going to go ahead and create the learning paths. So this is the first one that we're looking at, and to do so, we're going to go into course B. We're going to go ahead and hit enrollment methods. And what we're going to do is select learning path from the method. We'll be taken to the screen over here where we'll be able to decide if this method's enabled, the default role. We have some enrollment duration settings. And over here, this is where we're going to go select the course that we want this learning path or this enrollment to send to this course. Then we can decide if we want to keep the groups, and we can send a welcome message. So in this case, what we're going to go and do is select intro to course A. And after we've saved that method, what I will say here is in enrollment B in intro to course B under the enrollment methods, the enrollment is after completing course intro course A. Right, so that is our first learning path created. What we're going to go do is create the second one, which is extremely similar to what we've just done before. So we're going to go ahead into course C, intro to course C, and we're going to click on enrollment methods, and once again select the learning path. And the only difference here is instead of selecting Intro to Course A, we're going to go ahead and select Intro to Course B and click on Save Changes. And what we'll see here is in Intro to Course C, in the enrollment methods, it states after completing course Intro to Course B. Right, we've done our first set of rows, our first row. Now what we want to do is create the learning paths so that once Intro to Course C is completed, the end user can now access Moderate Course A and Moderate Course B. So what we're going to want to do is click Access on Moderate Course A, head on to Enrollment Methods, back to Learning Path method. And over here, we're simply going to add Intro to Course C. There's our enrollment method. And next, what we're going to do is jump into Moderate Course B, same thing, enrollment methods, select the learning path. And what we're going to do is select Intro to Course C once again. So what we've effectively done is as soon as Intro to Course C is finished, we've set the learning path to both Moderate Course A and B so that the enrollment takes place after Course C is finished. So our last learning path that we want to create is Moderate Course C over here. So we're going to click Access, get onto Enrollment Methods, click on the learning path, and we're going to go ahead and select Moderate Course A for the first instance. And then what we're going to go do is create a second instance of learning path. And we're going to go ahead and select Moderate Course B over here. And what we see now we're in Moderate Course C. Remember, in our enrollment methods, we have our two methods over here, namely after completing Moderate Course A and after completing Moderate Course C. And what that will show us is that we've created our course learning path for these specific end users. And if I just were to go to Home Page Display and select Show User Enrolled Courses Only, my user from branch B that has entered the platform for the first time, they will only see Intro to Course A. And when they click Access on that, they'll be taken to the full content of Intro to Course A, and they'll be able to start working through that. And once they complete this, they'll be enrolled into Intro Course B. So what happens within a course if you don't want all the course content to become available straight away? You do have the option to restrict activities by conditional restrictions. So we do have a whole host of them. I'm going to go through them rather quickly. The first one is activity completion. In other words, you're restricting an activity based on whether a previous activity has been completed or not. The date option is if you want to set a fixed date. In other words, an activity is available to a certain date or from a certain date. With grade, an activity can be restricted by either a passing or failing grade. This can either be a course total grade or it can also be a specific activity. With branch, what you can do is you can segment activities within your course by a branch, which are your site-wide segmentations, and you can do the same for group, which is your course-wide segmentations. You can also restrict an activity based on user profile or your custom profile fields, and you can also restrict via relative date. In other words, from the beginning of the course or from the end of the course, as well as you can choose from enrollment date too. And your second last one is leaderboard level. That relates to your gamification level. In your leaderboard, you can restrict content based on your site participation level. We are covering gamifications in a future webinar, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And then lastly, you can also create restriction sets where you can create complex logic, and yeah, you can get quite creative with those too. And I'll give you an example towards the end. Then in conjunction with conditional activity restrictions, we're also going to take a look at activity completion settings. This is how an activity is determined by the system to be complete. So you have three options. The first one is do not indicate activity completion. This is useful for things that are not marked as like a certificate or an assignment that you don't want to count to the gradebook, or you don't want to count to user progression. You'll use the do not indicate activity completion option. Your next options are students can manually mark activity as complete. This would be done by the student themselves. Once they have completed the activity, what they would go ahead and do is click a button to show that they have completed it. But maybe you don't want the students to manually mark the activity as complete. Maybe there are some conditions that need to be met, in other words, for the activity to show as complete. So if it's a page or video, you can select the activity must be viewed in order to be complete as a condition. And if there's a quiz or an assignment, what you can do is the conditions can be a grade. It can be a passing grade or failing grade. So in other words, if you have a quiz and your conditions are a passing grade, if you fail that quiz, the system won't recognize the quiz as completed. And if you have conditional activity restrictions, you will not be able to progress until you've passed the quiz. So let's take a deeper dive into it and let's go through some examples. So we're back into Intro to Course A. This is what our course looks like. And what we're going to go and do is just concentrate on our first module over here. And what we have is a video that we would like the end user to watch before the evaluation shows up. So what our end goal is when the end user joins this course, what they'll first see is just the video, and then they'll know that they need to work through that, and the evaluation will show up after that. So what we're going to want to do first is go into editing mode by clicking on Edit Course Material. And we'll go ahead and what we're going to do is take a look at our evaluation. And we're going to go ahead and hit Edit Settings. So all these settings up top here we have covered in previous webinars. What we are focusing on today is the last two, namely the Restrict Access and Activity Completion bar. So let's look at our activity add restrictions. Here we see all the restriction types that we've been through. And for this particular example, what we're going to want to do is click on Activity Completion. Remember, what we're trying to do is limit this quiz to make sure that the end user watches the video before being able to attempt the assessment. So what we'll be taken to is a block that looks like this once we've selected activity completion, and we will see student must match the following. Activity completion, we can choose the activity and we can choose another condition. So what we're going to go ahead and do is choose webinar intro video. And over here we have must be marked as complete, and then a couple of other ones too that you can use for activity completion. And then what we also want to go do is define how this quiz is completed. So what we'll take a look at doing is opening this up and saying show activity as complete when conditions are met. And over here, this is where you can select the conditions. For this specific example, since it's a quiz, you'll be given some conditions that you can select. This one, require passing grade and student must receive a grade to complete this activity. So if the student doesn't receive a grade, this activity will not be registered as complete by the system. And if you've got a conditional activity restriction based on this quiz, which we're going to set up shortly, then of course they won't be able to see the other content unless they pass this criteria over here. So what this will look like from the course view is you'll see that the evaluation has now been restricted and is not only available unless the activity webinar intro video is marked as complete. And you'll see over here, this is changed from manual completion to blue, which indicates auto completion. So now this stipulation states that the end user, if they come onto the platform, they'll still see the evaluation. They just won't be able to click on it because they'll see that it's restricted because of the intro to video. But oftentimes you don't want the end user to see the evaluation. You want to keep that hidden until the webinar is complete. And that's where this I button comes into play, where you can click on it and cross it out. And what that allows you to do is hide the activity completely unless the conditions are met. Awesome, let's jump to module 2. So module 2 over here, what I'm alluding to is that you can edit entire topics. You don't have to necessarily go and edit each activity itself. This method, although what you will do is you won't be able to go and change completion settings. So you might want to go into the settings and just change those. So for this example, what we're taking a look at is grades. We're going to go and select grade, and what we'll be taken to is we can go and choose the grade item. And we can also go ahead and choose the parameters of the grade. So we're going to go ahead and choose evaluation, and after that, what we're going to decide is that the end user must receive or be equal to 50% in order for this. They must receive 50% or greater on the evaluation in order for this topic or this page to become available. Back to activity completion again, we're going to go ahead and select show activity as complete when conditions are met. And this time, because it's just a page, we're just going to go and select student must view this activity to complete it. So as you can see over here, now we have our page set up. So it's not available unless you achieve a required score in 1.2 evaluation, hidden otherwise. So you can see already our course is taking form, where the end user will have to complete or view the webinar video, and they'll have to have a passing grade in order to watch or read module 2 introduction. So with the evaluation, what I've done over here is I've set up the activities so that you must complete 2.1 module 2 introduction, and it's hidden otherwise. In other words, this auto completion must change from a blue to a green, I think, and it will say completed. And once this is completed, this will become available. Of course, that's on the end user's view. Right, so let's take a look at the rest of our course. And what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go and edit this topic now. So sometimes you have multiple branches in the same course, but maybe there's a branch that you know is going to need some supplemental work or needs to hand in extra assignments, etc. So what we're going to go ahead and do is edit this whole topic, and we're going to go select branch. And simply enough, what you're going to go and do is select the branch that you want to restrict the topic by. And what it will show you is that it is not available unless you belong to branch B. So this is the whole topic. Remember earlier I mentioned that you might want to go change the completion settings if you're restricting entire topics like this. So that's your branch quite easily, but let's go have a look at dates and times. We're going to take a look at our refresher information. We're going to click on edit settings, and this time we're going to go select date. So over here, what you can do is select from and until a specific date. In other words, this piece of content will only become available from or until a specific date. So you do have some other options, and that is relative dates. So this is when you don't want it to be a fixed time. Maybe it's after the course start date, maybe it's before the course end date, and then another interesting setting is also after user enrollment date. So over here we said 2 weeks after user enrollment date. In other words, if I enrolled today and this piece of content will only show up in 2 weeks. But if someone enrolled in a week's time, this piece of content would only show for them in another 2 weeks. So this is quite a cool setting that keeps your content dripping at nice relative dates for you. And then just taking another look at activity completion settings. For this specific example, we've gone ahead and show activity as complete when conditions are met. And once again, the student must view activity to complete it. So what does that look like? Over here, it will say restricted, and depending on the relative date that you've chosen, you'll have your stipulation over here and your activity completion. So there is another way of restricting content, and that is based on gamification level. So I did mention that we are covering a gamification webinar coming up shortly, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But basically what you're going to want to do over here is click on Edit Settings. For this example, what I'm going to want to show you is just that you can add more than one setting. So what we're going to want to do here is restrict this example or this link by a branch, and we're going to go ahead and choose branch B again. And what we're going to go do now is add a second restriction. So there's the button that we're going to go ahead and click, and this time we're going to go and click level. And what we'll be able to do is select greater or equal to or below and choose our levels. So we're going to go ahead and select 6. And you can note the and button over there. For this, we do not want to select activity completion. So no indication of activity completion because this is just a URL. There's nothing to actually complete over here. And firstly, we'll notice it says restricted, not available unless you belong to branch B and you are level 6 or greater. We'll also notice there's no activity completion block over here, and that's because we selected do not indicate activity completion. And this is just to show you that this specific URL will not show up in your course completion box, which makes sense. We don't want this to be part of the completion progress. This is just a URL that we want these users to be able to access once these stipulations have been reached. So that is if you belong to branch B and you're level 6 or greater. But what if you just want to add all? Well, there's a setting over here that you can go and change from student must match all of the following to student must match any of the following. And what that does is change the and sign into an or sign. So what that looks like is that you must, in order to have this URL, you must either belong to branch B or you must be greater than level 6. So very similarly to branch, you can restrict content based on groups and user profile. Remember, branch are your site-wide segmentations, whereas groups are your course-wide segmentations. And what we're going to go ahead here and do is click the edit button. What I've gone ahead and done is created a Department A forum and a Department B forum. And what we go ahead and do is select group. And similarly to the branch, what we're going to go ahead and do is select the group that we want to restrict the content by. So in this example, what I've done is I've restricted Department A unless you belong to the Department A group, and I've restricted the forum for Department B unless you belong to Department B group. And they are hidden otherwise, so no one from Department A will even know that Department B forum exists unless they belong to both of the groups. So you can also do the same thing for user profile. So those are your custom profile fields that you've set up in the site admin section. And what I've gone ahead and done here is I've selected site location. So just to demonstrate, my Department A forum is now restricted unless you belong to site location Cape Town, and Department B forum is located unless you belong to site location New York. Now, of course, you can also add nested restriction sets. And what that means is if you clicked on restrictions set, you can add nested restriction to apply complex logic, and you can get very creative with this. But basically what you're going to want to do is when you select that option, there's a add restriction box over here. Just note that there's still the one over here. This is where you can add a second complex logic. And it might look like this. So what we're going to want to do is our first restriction is group Department A, and our second nested restriction is going to become our user profile site location Cape Town. So yeah, you can then, once you can go do, what it will take a look at is, or what it will look like is that it's not available unless you belong to Department A and your site location is in Cape Town. So you have to be in Cape Town and in Department A for this restriction to work. And of course, there are some, you can get quite complex with it, where you can start, this specific forum is only available if you are in site location is in Cape Town and you're in Group A, or you are in site location New York and belong to Group B. So you can get really creative with the nested profile fields and your conditional activity restrictions as a whole. Very cool to use, and yeah, very nice to drip content and make sure that users are able to learn at their own pace and are not overwhelmed by going into a course and seeing a whole bunch of content that they need to complete. So of course we do, now what we're going to take a look at is course completion and default settings. So in order to take a look at that, you're going to go into your course admin and you're going to click on course completion. In your course completion module or your tool, this is where you can define how a course is completed, and you can go in and either select that all the conditions need to be met or any of the conditions need to be met, and then you can go ahead and select some specific conditions. So a specific grade by a specific date, maybe there needs to be a specific enrollment duration, some other courses have to be completed. This is where you're going to go ahead and define exactly how this course is completed. And remember, when setting up course completion paths, the enrollment method states that the first course needs to be completed and for the user to be enrolled into the second course. And this is how you're going to define that completion. Of course, there are some default activity completions that you can go ahead and change. And this is just changing the completion tracking. It's always on manual as default. You can actually go ahead and select from all the activities what you want this default to be. So for pages, as we discovered, you might want to change that to criteria as met when page is viewed. With quizzes, maybe you want to change the default completion tracking to when a specific grade or passing grade has been achieved. Your next thing your next tab allows you to bulk edit activity completion. So this means you'll be able to go into all the activities that you've completed. You'll be able to see how the completion tracking works. In other words, what you have set at the moment, and then you'll be able to go and bulk edit those activities. Then of course, you also have course recompletion that you can set up. This is extremely useful for when you want to add recertification for a course, or you have refresher courses that you would like the end user to take. So once again, you're going to go into course admin. You're going to click on course recompletion this time. And what you're going to go ahead and do is you can select the period. You can select a recompletion message. Here's the message. And then there's some advanced settings like keeping quiz attempts and your SCORM attempts and archiving all the data for you. Great, so that has come to the end of my Q&A session, or sorry, rather come to the end of my webinar session, the beginning of the Q&A session. So please post your questions in the chat and I'll get through as many of them as possible. All right, great. So our first question is, can you have multiple enrollment methods? So if other words, have you set up a learning path? Can you have another enrollment method on that course? Yes, you can. You can set up multiple enrollment methods. In other words, if you would like to set up self-enrollment on some of the courses in a learning path, you're more than welcome to go ahead and do that. Cool. The next question is, can you add courses into a learning path? Yes, once again, you can. That's the power of setting up the learning paths as an enrollment method, that you can go and edit your learning path while it's live by just changing some of the learning path settings and redirecting your path or adding an extra course in. Next question here is, can you add activities into a course once it is live? Yes. The dripping activities and the restrictions really allow you to evaluate your users' progress. Maybe they're doing badly and you would like to add some supplementary stuff in there, or supplementary quizzes or information. What you can then do is restrict that module by a grade, and maybe that's a failing grade this time. So all students that are doing badly, you can go ahead and supplement information for them. Similarly, with students that are doing well, you can go ahead and supplement them with a some sort of prize based on their gamification level or their good grades. Cool. And my question here is, can you just give an end user example of what the learning path looks like? Yes, I can do so. I can give you a very basic example. What I've gone and done is just logged in via a student, and I've gone ahead and clicked on course A. And what I just want to demonstrate for you is, when we set up a course, what I did purposely is I left the first one at the video as a manually marked, so the end user will want to come and mark this as complete. Now, of course, when you want a activity to be manually marked, I can go ahead and actually click here and say that it's been completed without going and watching the video. So that's where the conditional activity restrictions will really come into place, or your activity settings, sorry, so that you really want to select that this page must be viewed in order to complete, so that when I go into it and view it, it's marked as complete, not manual. But for this setting, what would happen is, what I would go and do is I would mark this as complete, and my evaluation will show up. It's been marked as complete already, hence why I can go see the rest of the content. Because remember, we based this one on a passing grade, which I did do. That's why it is shown as complete. And this one, what we did, it was view. This one we needed to view. And then, as you can see, we have now viewed the page content, and that's why it has automatically marked as complete. And for this, it's an assessment evaluation that showed up because I've completed this. Once I have completed that, then if I had based the rest of my restrictions or the rest of my content based on this activity, then it would show up. And of course, I am in branch B, so I see this extra information over here, and I can go ahead and mark it as complete because it's set to manual. Awesome. I think that's the end of the questions for today. So thank you very much for joining me. Please come back next week or in the future for our future webinars, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.